Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started here in just a few seconds, waiting for for Zoom to catch up for all of our attendees. We'll get started here in about 10 seconds. In the meantime, enjoy our smiling faces. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, and thank you to our members for joining us for our conversation today. I just wanted to remind you that this webinar, amongst all the webinars that we've done, about over 50 in total, are available on our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube, search for Vegas Chamber, you'll find all of our material there, including some of our interviews that we've done in DC, which we held last week. Before I introduce our guest speakers, I do want to thank our webinar sponsors. Without your support, none of this could happen. Thank you to SCE Federal Credit Union and UNLV Executive MBA Program. We appreciate your support in everything you do for us and helping us bring this important information and conversations to you. I'd also like to take a moment to highlight a few chamber programs for you as well. Earlier this month, we announced the new U.S. Bank Coaching Growth Center at the Vegas Chamber. I'm very excited about this benefit because it gives you and your employees access to goals coaching with professional life coaches. To find out more information and to connect with a customer goals coach, go to vegaschamber.com/coaching and join us for a meeting on September 30th at 10 a.m. on Zoom, which you can find on our events calendar. Lastly, last Friday, we grand opened the very first of its kind, the Employee NV Business Hub at the Vegas Chamber. This is also an exciting opportunity for all of our members. This is a partnership between Workforce Connections, Nevada's Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation, Nevada's Department of Business and Industry, and it gives access to businesses for services such as training, recruitment, and even tax credits to help fill some of those talent spots that you have. To access the Hub's resources, go to vegaschamber.com. It's the main story of the day. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's discussion. Mike Peregrina, he's the CFO and co-founder at homie.com, a tech-based real estate brokerage company that is making home ownership easy, affordable, and accessible to all. He's also a UNLV graduate. Thank you for joining us, Mike.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Jeff Sailing, who's the Executive Director of StartUpNV, which is a nonprofit incubator and accelerator for Nevada-based startup companies that provides expert mentorship to entrepreneurs and access to a network of capital partners. We almost had a little bit of a fight in the waiting room because he's also an adjunct professor at UNR.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Well, thanks for having me on. And I'm here in our Vegas office, big fan here, and we support the whole state.
Of course. And
no need for fighting.
No, of course. And because I shouted out UNLV, I have to mention UNR as well. It's a great partnership as a whole state. So thanks for joining us, for both of you. For today's conversation, I really want to focus on the innovation aspect and talk about how we got to where we are today. But before we begin, a lot of you, probably similar to me, were asking yourself, what is Homie? So Mike, I want to turn it over to you first. What is Homie?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, thanks for having me and hello to everyone out there. I miss being in Vegas. I can't wait for things to be back to normal so that we can all hang out in person. So Homie is a tech-enabled broker. We help people buy and sell homes. Along the way, we help them save about $10,000 on average when they use Homie. We believe that the real estate industry is ripe for disruption, and we're trailblazing that for everyone. We also help people get a loan. We also have Homie Title, which does the closing services, Homie Insurance, and last month we launched our Homie Home Services, which enables people and helps people with all the services that they need to really extend the lifetime of home ownership and helping them every step along the way, like lawn care, like cleaning services, staging services, utilities, all that good stuff. So a one-stop shop for real estate, one can call it.
That's great. I know you guys have been taking the market by storm. You launched in March. Very quickly, you became the official real estate sponsor for the Raiders, the official real estate partner. Right. You also struck a deal with the Golden Knights to help support. I think it's for every save, right? For every save, there's a donation to Homie Helps Initiative. Right. I'm sure they had to write a big check for the amount of saves that we had in this postseason. And then, of course, you guys raised, I think, $23 million, and I believe you said that number's up even higher for some of the geographic expansion. So you guys have been busy since hitting the market.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a lot of hard work and such an honor and a humbling pleasure to be partners with the Las Vegas Raider. I don't know a better team and a better sports franchise to be a part of the Las Vegas community. And the same thing with the Vegas Golden Knights. They always say, community is a contact sport. And that for us was just wonderful that they have so many community alignment and community initiatives that for us, one of our S's, as we like to say at Homie, is social impact. And being able to be a part and flexing our corporate giving arm, which is Homie Helps, was very wonderful to see that there are other partners that really are invested in Homie and invested in the community as we are.
That's great. Absolutely. Jeff, I want to turn over to you for a second to get a little bit of information and a little background. Can you tell us, what is StartUpNV?
StartUpNV is a business incubator and accelerator focused on scalable startups anywhere in the state of Nevada. So what we do is we have 3 programs for founders and 2 programs for angel investors. On the founder side, we have an accelerator program that helps companies that are a little bit more advanced to essentially, start their selling process and raise their initial rounds of capital. For companies who aren't quite as advanced, we have an online incubator model, which helps get companies ready to get into the accelerator, or if they don't need our help raising capital, to raise capital on their own. And finally, we have a once-a-year boot camp program called AngelNV that focuses on both founders and angels. On the founder side, we're right in the middle of our 12-week program, started September 8th, ends on December 8th. And we have a bunch of speakers and pitch practice sessions and things like that for the founders. And then after that ends, we focus on angel investors. We recruit 40 of them, go up and teach those 40 angel investors how to be super productive angel investors. And then at the end of their course, they invest together $200,000 in one of the startups that came through the founder program. And they do that because they each chip in $5,000 times 40, $200,000, and they make one $200,000 investment in one of the companies. And we also have our own angel fund called FundNV. It's $1 million fund, and that fund is focused on the companies that are in the accelerator program to get their first pre-seed investment and advance their cause to hopefully get them to a seed round.
That's great, Jeff. And there's a reason why both of you are on this webinar today. Jeff, you had a great article that I read while planning this webinar. In that, the headline was that tough economic times brings out the entrepreneurial spirit. And we'll learn here in just a little bit. You probably would have had Mike coming up to StartUpNV to kind of help launch his company. But tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out there for entrepreneurs.
Sure. Well, tough economic times brings out the ideas, right? When folks can't do traditional jobs, they tend to start new companies. Some of the companies we take for granted today, like Airbnb and Uber and Lyft and those kind of companies, they started in the last economic downturn. Companies like Dropbox made huge advances during the last economic downturn. Mm-hmm. So when things get tough, people get creative. So we're seeing that happen, especially in our Angel NV program. We thought that we would have 50 or 60 companies apply to the Angel NV program to get prepared for angel funding. We've had 220 companies apply. So There's a lot of energy out there in the market from founders who are ready to go to the next stage and maybe take control of their own lives and their own careers by starting their own companies.
So Jeff, you talk about when tough economic times, it really kind of makes people get creative. Somebody in the chat box, Angie, hey Angie, you said necessity is the mother of invention. I could not think of a better segue than that to talk about Mike's story. If you haven't had a chance now, go to YouTube, look on Homie's YouTube channel. There's a great video on there that really talks about the why behind Homie. So I won't steal any thunder on that. Mike, tell us, how'd you come up with the idea to start Homie?
Thanks for sharing that, and anyone who takes the opportunity to look at that. It's also about my partners as well and our co-founders. It takes a team effort, and that's something that I want to make sure, and I would be remiss if I didn't share. So just a little bit of history of myself. I grew up in South Central LA, immigrant parents. Unfortunately, my parents got divorced, and my mother, who I have a high degree of respect for, obviously super biased, but she just had this incredible work ethic. For 15 years, I never saw the lady sleep. Wake up at 5 in the morning, at 4 in the morning, do a paper route for the LA Times, and then get dropped off at the school bus stop and hop on an hour or so ride to the San Fernando Valley to go to junior high, which was crazy, an hour each way. But it got me out of gangs, drugs, crimes, and really instilled this academic work ethic along with the work ethic to work. And that just instilled for me from a very young age. And then she would pick me up. We would go pick up produce from my aunt's wholesaler, and then go through neighborhoods and sell produce out of the back of a 1991 Nissan pickup truck. And then my mom was the seamstress during the day. She'd bring back garments, and for a nickel a piece, we would just stitch them, and she would fix them. So that early on for me, the American dream of owning a home. When my parents got divorced, my mother bought her home, but she couldn't afford it. So we actually rented out the garage with no HVAC and no plumbing. And just everything we had, we always fought for. My mother came to this country for the opportunity for her kin to have better opportunity. And that I feel like is an obligation for myself and my siblings. And then moved to Las Vegas. And then that's where the homie creation story came from. Put myself through college by waiting tables. I went to UNLV. I went to Bonanza High School. I studied architecture at UNLV. And during that time, unfortunately, I got caught up in the subprime housing crisis, where we were buying homes 2 at a time, stated income, no money down. And then the 2008 recession just completely crushed me along with other people. I lost everything. And then just woke up with this feeling that, hey, the real estate industry is really backwards. It is not centered around the consumer. It's not doing right by the consumer. And I woke up with this epiphany that it's my responsibility to fix it, and have never stopped thinking about it since. During that time, deep in a recession, no one's hiring any architects or designer. Obviously, construction has completely stopped. We're deep in a recession. So I decided to go back to UNLV. This time I studied finance, and then I started my finance career as an investment banker. Did that for a couple of years, moved to Salt Lake City. And I worked in venture capital for a couple of years. And Jeff, if I can be of any assistance to you and your organization, please do not hesitate to ask. And I'm happy to help there and kind of share my experiences. And then after seeing Airbnb and Uber and all these shared economy concepts, obviously coming out of that recession, it was very evident that the real estate industry was next on that list. And I was lucky enough to meet a couple of my co-founders. We came together and launched the product because we felt like the real estate industry was not really delivering the experience that people want in a real estate experience. And then obviously the fees are incredibly high, and there's so many people with their hands in the cookie jar, and it's not simple. And we really operate off 4 S's, which is simplicity, savings, service, and social impact, as I shared earlier. So yeah, a little bit of history on myself and the business.
So Mike, that's an incredible story. And again, I encourage all of you to watch that video, because it does go into the co-founders and your other partners in it. You found yourself in a pretty dark situation. I mean, I know that you quickly went through it, but you saved up the money just to buy property in California, all for it to come crashing down. So yeah, if anyone had a reason to kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, well, this stinks, it was you. But instead, you went and tried to find a solution, and you created into an idea. For all the chamber members that are on now, what advice do you give them if they find themselves in a similar scenario? How do they continue to persevere? What should they be looking for?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. And one, I bought all my real estate and lost all my real estate in Las Vegas. So just wanted to be clear around that piece. I think you have to be mission driven. Over the last 15 years of my professional career, I've collated these 13 C's of entrepreneurship. Jeff, I'm happy to share that with you. It may be really useful, or it may just be junk. I don't know. And I love alliterations, as you can probably tell. And over time, I've picked up these sayings, these quotes, and I can't remember, and I'm going to butcher it. But there was someone that said, in X century, it was all about labor. In X+1 century, it's all about knowledge. In this new century that we're in, it's all about love and passion and mission, right? So as generations evolve over time, you do work, one, because you have to, and then hopefully you get the opportunity to do something you love because you choose to do that. And if you're mission driven, it really, really helps those dark days to keep you focused on why you do it. And I'll share one story. And behind every transaction, there's a very similar story. There was a family in Utah that couldn't afford, that were having problems conceiving a child. Now, we've talked about our kids here on this call earlier. We know what those kids mean to us. They used Homey, saved almost $25,000. Well, in Utah, the average in vitro session is 25 grand. Well, guess what they did with that 25 grand? 9 months later, they had baby Calvin. When I saw that story, and I used to share this without crying, and hopefully I'll get through that. But we did that. Homey enabled that to happen. And when things hit the fan and COVID hits or any other sort of economic turbulence, Las Vegas, out of any city in the world, by the way, has this recognition and this DNA in us to reinvent ourselves. We did it in 2011. We did it in 2008. And I have every reason to believe we're going to freaking do it again in 2021, right? And then things may look a little bit different, but you got to keep persevering. And if you're mission driven, if you have this, it's not about me, it's about them or the consumer, you're going to continue to win. And sometimes when people say, oh, the traditional real estate agents, they hate you, and loan officers hate you, and now title and escrow officers hate you. We don't focus on that. We focus on the consumer, because if we take our eye off that ball, we're not going to win. Right. And that's what I would say, is just continue to be mission driven. And there was a lot of great comments on the chat. And I would add another one is pressure makes diamonds. Right. And without that friction, without that pressure, you ain't going to get a diamond. Right. So.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. A lot of passion there too. And I'm, and everybody feels it. There's a question from Mary Beth. Hi, Mary Beth. Good to have you on. Just to follow up on the question, Jeff, I'd like to ask this to you. What's your best advice to businesses who are struggling or about to go under?
Well, it's a lot like what Mike said. Stay focused on your mission. Stay focused on what's important to you and the founding team, and to your customers. If you focus on that, you're going to give yourself every chance to succeed. It's not always going to work, but you're going to have the best chance you have to succeed. And that's the big advice, is stay focused.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. So, I love to see the trends in terms of participation. You had said the number earlier in terms of entrepreneurs participating was around 220, up from the average. So there's a lot of activity there. What advice do you give those folks who are entrepreneurs or wanting to start their own business? What advice do you have in terms of seeking financial investments during this economic downturn?
It's harder than you think. You watch a show like Shark Tank, and you see somebody pitch a clever idea to Mark Cuban and Barbara and all the rest, and they spend 3 minutes pitching. And then, in many situations, it looks like they're making a deal right there in like 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes max. And that the funding and all of it is sort of a combination of your idea and your personality. And that's misleading. You do have to have a great idea. You do have to have, you have to be a credible representative, a credible group of founders, but mostly it's about execution. When you're out looking for someone to give you an angel investment or a Series A or a seed investment, it's a little bit about your idea. It's mostly about the founding team, and can they execute? So as you're thinking about going out and making that raise, think about not only your story and your idea, but think about how you're going to get that credibility across to the people who you're asking for investment. Because it's not about having a clever idea, or it's just a little bit about having a clever idea. Mostly it's about executing. Because if you can't make the investors believe that you and your co-founders can actually do the work and produce the result, then it's like, okay, this was a great pitch session. You're a nice person. That's an interesting idea. But what they're thinking is, this person's never going to pull it off. So you have to be able to get across that not only it's a great idea, but that you can actually do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mike, I see you nodding along. It seems like a lot of this stuff is bringing up past memories or maybe even current scenarios. I'd love to invite you to add to the conversation.
I nod because I've been in those situations. One thing that comes to mind is have thick skin, is get used to the word no. And it's not necessarily a no on you or the founding team or even the idea. I agree. Like the idea is as a piece of it, execution and increasing the probability of execution. You got to do it with team. One of my C's is collaboration. You have to have a team. And you can't be selfish. You know, owning 100% of nothing is still zero, right? But owning a third or a quarter of something, when you bring together a team, and that's something that we're very proud of at Homey. You look across, you know, the senior management, middle management. There's a lot of talented individuals there, and we share the wealth. Every full-time employee at Homey has options in the business because we want that founder, that owner mentality. But you got to have thick skin, right? And usually the no is not right now. We're passing because the stage, the development, the idea, there's no data, there's no pattern recognition just yet. But at the angel level, you know, Jeff's right. It is about the founding team, right? And if you bring together a team that has these experiences, especially in the industry you're trying to go after, the credibility and the probability of success just starts increasing and increasing over time. And the other thing is humility, is be humble. If someone tells you no, and this is something that we've done at Homey, is it's not necessarily about you. You got to look at it objectively, but how can you take that opportunity, look in the mirror and say, what can I sharpen up? What are the data points that I need to do? How can I represent the business better? How can I articulate better? What can I share? What can I do? Who else can I bring on and invite to be a part of the team to continue learning, right? So always take those no's or not right now or not at this time as an opportunity for introspection first before you start getting mad and blaming other people. I always hear entrepreneurs and investors just saying these horrible stories about entrepreneurs saying and misbehaving is a good way to put it. And it's just not a good representation for entrepreneurs. It's ultimately it's you, right? And then they get this confidence, like, I am glad I did not invest in that type of entrepreneur, right?
Thank you. You know, you're absolutely right. Really quickly, we had a question come in for someone that wants you to share the 13 C's, maybe not all 13 on the call, but at least a link or something that we can redirect them to.
Yeah, let me review it one more time, make sure there ain't no chicken scratch on there, but I'll share it with both of you and then you can disseminate it to the organization if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, the last one is cockroach, and you'll have to tune in on why that's the case, but I'll share that one.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to finding out how that's the last one. I have a feeling it's like you never die or something like that. So, so Jeff, you mentioned Angel NV before, and again, if you just Google search Startup NV and look at news articles, it talks a lot about what Angel NV does for the community. In particular, when you talk about Angel NV, you really talk about the landscape of investors here in Las Vegas. How there's a lot of investors here that people may not know about. So I wanted to ask you, in terms of raising capital, you had talked a little bit about that it's hard. How's Vegas different than any other place from a geography standpoint?
Well, so Vegas has money. There's not a lack of wealth in Las Vegas, but what we do lack is this DNA or this muscle, if you prefer that analogy, for being angel investors. If you know, I've spent a fair amount of my career in Silicon Valley and Seattle and Austin, Texas, where it's second nature. I mean, everybody's an angel, it seems like. And a lot of it becomes because of exactly, you know, what Mike talked about. Companies like where I worked, people got options. People shared the wealth. And when those companies had exits, it created a lot of wealth amongst not just the founders, but amongst the entire employee group. And guess what most of them do? They become angel investors. They take a piece of what they made and they put it back to work in either their own startup or in somebody else's startup if they're not the kind of person who's going to found the thing. That sort of flywheel of companies getting formed, investors investing, growing big, creating jobs, having exits, and then those people that made money reinvesting in that startup community, we don't have that flywheel built here yet. So we're going out and finding angels, finding people who are accredited investors, and teaching them how to be angels to get the investor half of that flywheel going. You know, we had a couple of starts here in the last 20 years for angel investing in Vegas. The Vegas Valley Angels were around from the 90s through a little after, I think 2012, 2014. They got hit in the downturn, and then they kind of aged out, right? And they got to an age where investing in startups, which typically takes 10 to 12 years to see a return, just wasn't practical. So they just kind of stopped. And when Tony Hsieh and that group did the downtown project, it also lost momentum. So we're seeking to grab that, find that next group of accredited investors, teach them how to be angel investors, and then create a nice pipeline of companies for them. Homie's kind of past what we usually work on in terms of raising capital and moving ahead. And I will have you as a guest speaker at some point, Mike. But those companies that are a little earlier than where Mike and Homie are, introducing them to the angels is part of our mission. And creating these new angels is part of our mission. Not just because we care about the founders and getting them investment capital, but because that flywheel effect that I talked about a minute ago, it's great for your entire community. It actually it democratizes wealth creation, so that the people who, maybe haven't gone out and made millions of dollars can still, they can chip in $5,000, $10,000 into a startup investment, where that might not be super meaningful on its own, but when you put 40 or 50 of those people together, it's meaningful. And so that's part of what Angel Envy is doing, is creating that ecosystem on the angel side here in Nevada, where we have money, we just don't have the knowledge about how to deploy it. So we're happy to provide that. It's part of our mission as a nonprofit. And frankly, it's what gave me a chance, is being part of those communities, part of that flywheel effect in the Bay Area, Seattle and Austin. And frankly, I've been here 12 years and we need it here. We deserve it here. We have all of the people here who work their butts off, that can create these awesome startup opportunities in a bunch of different industries. We just need to find them a way to get some funding to get started.
Jeff, that's great. And I mean, you talk about that we deserve it. We have the infrastructure there. If you've been paying attention to what the city has been doing and the state has been doing in terms of trying to bring that knowledge into the state through the innovation centers, the one that you're working out of. I know that UNLV has one as well. I mean, you see all these innovation hubs going up. We know a few that are opening up in Reno or talking about opening up. So you're absolutely right when we say the environment is ready, especially because to channel some of Mike's energy from earlier, we've dealt with this in 2008, and we know how to get out of something like this. So, for those that are on the call and maybe won't go down the entrepreneurial startup world, Mike, I wanted to kind of ask you this question. So what are you doing now that you've come into the market, which you've launched at the same time the world was shutting down in Vegas? So what are you doing to stay successful and relevant during this economic downturn?
Yeah, we love a good challenge. I mean, disrupting a $1 trillion real estate industry with a lot of incumbents sometimes feels like a cartel. That's already hard enough, but doing it during a COVID, something that the world has never seen before, was even more challenging. I think a couple of things. One of the things is I think that disrupting a space is going to take a lot of focus, and continue to focus on that, and less is better. From time to time, I think that's always been the case. And as you think about what you should be doing when you launch a market, so Las Vegas specifically, I've been in Las Vegas in 2009 where I had that feeling of desperation and I lost my job when I was on the Strip, right? So I really do empathize with every single person that has lost their job. It will come back. We will rebound from this. And we quickly pivoted in terms of acquiring customers, is what brands can we associate ourselves with, the Vegas Golden Knights, United Way of Southern Nevada, and again, flex our corporate giving arm, which is Homie Helps. And instead of focusing on everything else, we focus on what mattered, which is the community. And the community has our back and we have theirs. So every person that had to or was forced to sell their home because of COVID, because they lost their job, we completely wiped out the listing fee. The $2,500, we gave that right back to them. And then in addition, we also donated to a fund that we partnered up with the United Way of Southern Nevada to create a fund for people that need money to pay their mortgage, to pay their rent, to pay their utility bills. And we donated tens of thousands of dollars because we felt like that mattered. The other thing is the movement to this digital transformation. You see it in telehealth all day long in the past 6 months, right? Everything that was supposed to move digitally over the next 10 years has now happened in 10 months? And that innovation, that ingenuity of humans and our potential is fascinating to me. That is what fascinates me about entrepreneurship and about human potential as a whole. It is incredible, right? People are saying it's going to take 10 years, and all of a sudden in 10 months, we're actually doing it. And I think that's been the case for Homie in the real estate industry. On the sell side, you'll never see a real estate agent in person. It's all virtual, right? So we were already equipped to do this. On the buy side, it is a little bit more challenging. You do have to take more precautions, but our conversion rates has actually gone up because the people that were kind of window shopping, they're no longer window shopping. And we're also, as a business, not going to allow our buyer agents to be exposed to potentially a deathly virus. So we put things in place, and all of a sudden our conversions started going up. And then the tailwinds, right? Interest rates are at a 50-year low, right? People are refinancing. Buyers are now moving a little bit quicker. People that haven't lost their job probably won't right now, right? They're probably in middle management or senior management. So that's a little bit of cushion. So they're actually active in the market. And then you have this listing supply issue that's happened for the last 36 months, right? If you want to buy a home, you will be in a competitive offer, 9 out of 10 times. It just is what it is. So you have those dynamics and tailwinds. And I'm an entrepreneur, right? I always see the silver lining. I always see the glass half full. And that is just in my DNA. And you can tell me that the odds are against me. All right, give me the ball. Give me the ball. Allow me to take that risk and that calculated risk along with the team to make that happen. And I just think if you continue focusing on that, and we had 3 record-breaking months back to back to back, when in March, we thought the whole world was going to collapse, right? But by taking care of our people, taking care of our customers, obviously shoring up the balance sheet to make sure that the business could continue to grow and invest. And we're hiring, look at homie.com/careers, there's probably 45 positions that we have open as I checked last week, and it's probably more right now. And it's all across the spectrum of positions in the organization.
That's great. And it's good to hear too. I think a lot of trends are in our favor. Again, Jeff, you talk about the entrepreneurs participating. Mike, you're talking about the last 90 days of sales, which is great. It's funny, Jeff, that earlier you snapped in terms of how fast we went digital, and finding different ways to deliver that, to deliver the services that we deliver. You're absolutely right. At the Vegas Chamber, we went virtual in March. We've been doing virtual events for 6 months, and we quickly found out that people want to connect with us virtually, which of course is that now when I say that is like a duh, of course. But it's something that even when things return to normal and we start meeting in person again, there's no doubt that we're going to have to make some changes to be able to reach folks. I want to take this time really quickly to encourage anyone that has questions for our panelists. Please submit your questions. We've had a couple already come in. To access the Q&A feature, just hover over any of our lovely faces and you'll see Q&A at the very bottom. Go ahead and type in your questions through Q&A and not through the chat, just because it's a little bit harder for us to keep track of all of the chat that goes in there. So again, use the Q&A feature. Jeff, I want to kind of take us back to raising capital, and really for those companies or for those individuals maybe that are looking to start something else or even expand what they currently have. How would you advise someone to even start looking to go about raising capital?
Well, the first thing to do is to try to figure out where you fit, because there's all kinds of capital to be raised. A lot of the folks that are working on interesting tech at the university can get grant funding either through the university, through the EDA, or through the NIH, or through the SBIR program. And that's really great funding if it's appropriate for you, because it's non-dilutive. They're essentially granting you money. It can be a little complicated, so be prepared for a lot of writing. But if you can get money that way, that's awesome. If you can get a loan through the SBA or through a bank, again, non-dilutive funding. It's probably some of the least expensive capital that you can get to grow your business. Because even if you're paying, 3 or 4 or 5 or 8% interest, it's less expensive than actually selling equity in your business. And then the next most common is to go through angel or venture funding. I mean, if you're a young business and you don't have a track record, then angel funding, if you've got the kind of business that will appeal to an angel. So the way you have to think about it is, if you were an angel and you were going to invest $10,000, $100,000, $200,000 in a new startup, most of those angels are expecting anywhere from a 10 to a 30x return over the course of 5 to 7 years. So they're looking for businesses that can scale, and for founders who sometime in the next decade are going to want to sell their business, to be acquired. So, because that's how angels get their money back. They don't get profit sharing and other things. They get their money back when the business is acquired or when it goes public. The same is true for venture capital. Venture capital comes along after the angels have invested and the business has grown a bit. The venture capitalists aren't quite as aggressive with regard to their return, but the speed at which they want to get the return is much quicker. They're typically looking for an exit in 3 to 5 years. And so you have to figure out kind of which of those buckets you fit into as a business, and then do some research and approach the right people to get it there. And the last thing I'll mention is there's this newer form of, it's not brand new, but it's starting to get more traction, called revenue-based financing, where, if maybe you've got a business that's been around for a while, it's cash flowing okay, but you're not a good candidate for a bank loan. There's a lot of restaurants that fall into this category because they don't own their real estate, right? They've got a track record as a successful business. They've got good cash flow. Bank's not going to lend them money because they've got nothing to use as collateral. So there's groups of angels now that are putting together funds that are saying, all right, you need $100,000 or $200,000 to do whatever it is you're going to do with it. Great. We'll lend it to you, but you have to pay us back 2 times, 2 or maybe 3 times, whatever it is that we've loaned you. So if they've loaned you $100,000, they want $200,000 back, and they're going to start taking 5% of your sales 90 days from the moment they lend you the money until they get that $200,000 paid back. So for them, it's all about cash flow. And most businesses can afford to give up 5% of gross so that you can get some money to loan. And there are fewer groups that are doing that kind of investing, but they are out there. And if any of this is strange or a foreign language to you, feel free to connect with me, after this session today, and I can walk you through it, or I can refer you to some people that can help.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And his email is already in the chat box for everybody. So if you want to email Jeff, go ahead and blow up his email at jeff@startupnv, startup.nv.org.
No, I'm sorry. I typed it wrong. It's startupnv.org.
There we go. I was going to say 2 dots. Interesting.
No.
That's innovative. So we have a question that just came in. And we've heard this term of side hustling a lot. So what advice, and this is for both panelists, what advice do you give people who may have taken on what might be considered a side hustle to make more money in an economic downturn? And the follow-up question to that is, how can you maximize a small venture into something more significant like a startup?
So I'll take a shot at it. So everybody does side hustles, and I'm going to say of 10 businesses that want to get into our accelerator program, probably 7 or 8 of them have part-time founders working on them. And we created specifically an online incubator to help those founders get their business to the point where it is investable. Because oftentimes angel investors find it difficult to invest in a founder that's not going to be working full-time on their startup. So by all means, do your thing, pursue your dreams, do that side hustle to pay your family's bills and get working on it. if you do want to attract angel investing for that side hustle, you're going to have to figure out a way to transition it, get it growing to the point where you can make a full-time thing out of it. StartUpNV has some resources for you to help you do that. But by all means, you know, Mike talked about passion and pursuing your mission. And that's really what it's all about. You've heard stories of people saying, hey, if you love what you do, you never go to work. You know, it's all about doing what you love. And those side hustles usually are that kind of thing. You're doing something that you really like, and, you know, making that into your full-time mission is an awesome thing to do.
Yeah, I'll share my thoughts on that. Capital is one of the C's in entrepreneurship, and some businesses are not venture backable. And I think entrepreneurs have to be, one, okay with that, which is absolutely fine. Sometimes they're called lifestyle businesses, right? They'll free cash flow, great amounts of money. You know, you'll make a couple $1,000,000 or what have you a year, which is, by the way, a ton of money.
Yes.
But that's okay. You know, be comfortable with that. And there's grants, there's revenue, there's loans, there's venture capital, there's your own cash, right? Angel investing, friends, fools, and family. Sometimes it's called, but there's many options to capitalize a business, right? In terms of the side hustle, I actually see that the other way. I believe in focus. So you have to be all in on your mission and your vision. And you'll kind of be doing this side hustle for a little bit. And as Jeff mentioned, finding the time when you transition over is the right thing to do, because it is hard, especially if you have a family, you have to take care of those family members. You know, what I try to do is on nights and weekends, I focus on the opportunity for Homie, competitive landscape, revenue model, business model, pitch deck, resources, just try to get smart on the industry. And then I Googled if this idea already existed. And I went 10 pages deep, and I found Redfin, and I say, okay, that's great. That's market validation. It isn't exactly what we think the opportunity is, because it's much broader than that, but there was some market validation there. And I can't tell you how many times I talk to entrepreneurs, and as they're pitching me, I Google their idea and I said, have you heard of these 3 companies? That took me 30 seconds to do. And they have this blank look on their face. So don't forget to Google that, right? These ideas, there's a lot of ideas out there, but it's okay if there's something similar. You just have to find out how you're going to be different. And then whatever that transition is, you got to be all in on your business. You have to be in. If you're not willing to sacrifice everything and believe that your business is worth fighting for, then you shouldn't do it at all. And then you have to have a side hustle. I did some consulting for a while. There's a skill set that I have. So I got paid for those services, and I use that side hustle to pay for my mission, right? What I wanted to be a part of. And that I did that for a year or so. So I kind of see things similarly, but the opposite way. And then the other piece is once you find that, is all the capital providers, and really be open and honest with yourself, intellectually honest, if you will, to understand, is your business venture backable, right? Or not. And again, identifying that sooner than later is really helpful.
That's great feedback from both of you. And again, it's all about the passion. I mean, you know, for our members that are on the call, you know, we love speaking with all of our members, because we always ask them kind of their history of why they started their business, and that passion is always there, and finding it is key. So it looks like we have a couple more questions coming in, and then we'll wrap things up here. So first and foremost, kind of just very straightforward, a lot of talk about the Angel MV program. So how can people sign up, Jeff?
Well, there's 2 places to sign up. The easiest, most straightforward way is to go to our website, angelnv.com, which is separate and different from startupnv.org. You can go to either one of those websites, and there's a way for you to apply to the program. And even though it started a few weeks ago, we've put up our classes, the things that have happened on our YouTube channel, which is YouTube/StartUpNV. So you can register for the program, then kind of go to YouTube, catch up on it, and then come to the next session. So it is still open, and this part of the program is free. So anybody who wants to learn about, you know, raising money from angels, this is a good place to start.
That's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. The other question, Mike, was for you in terms of how you found your partners. You know, I think you covered it a little bit during this webinar. And again, I would encourage you to go to YouTube and check out the one that tells a story on Homie. I think it's a pretty spectacular and very encouraging. as we wrap up, I wanted to invite both Jeff and Mike to just for some closing comments. I mean, you heard from both of them today in terms of what they've went through and what they're seeing right now in their communities. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Any last thoughts for our members today?
Yeah, I'll answer the question on how I found my partners, and then tell in the comments. It took some time. I talked to a bunch of people. I talked to investors. I talked to entrepreneurs for a couple of things. One is to find people with deep domain expertise that perhaps were not overlapping with my skill set, because you need to do all kinds of things and move in different directions and move very quickly. And I also use that to soundboard if the idea, to poke holes at the plan, to poke holes at the business model, right? And a couple of things happen. You know, you get great insights from it. Sometimes people get really paranoid about an idea. Ideas are dime a dozen, right? I can share my playbook and my pitch deck to whomever, right? It is all about execution at the end of the day. And then the team that you bring together to increase that probability of success, right? And people get so paranoid around that. I shared the idea with everyone because I wanted to get true feedback. And there's a couple of things that happen. One, I got great feedback. Two, when everyone tells you don't do this, that should kind of, you know, turn on a light bulb. Why are everyone telling you not to do this? So you got to think about that. And then that tells you should probably do it. And when every real estate agent, when every loan officer and every title, oh, there's no money in this, there's no margins, et cetera, now we have incredible margins. You kind of see that as an opportunity as well. And then in terms of the partners, I was lucky enough to be in venture capital, where I had an email address. When I emailed any entrepreneur, almost anywhere, they would reply back. And that was really, really cool. And I'm forever grateful for the network that I built there. There's a real estate software business out of all places in Utah that was growing. And it's called Entrada. And we as Mercado partners, the firm that I was at, were always trying to invest in that business. And as I started learning more about the business and the entrepreneurs, Johnny Hanna's name came up over and over. I found out that he was leaving in early July of 2015. And I immediately just picked up the phone, had the opportunity to meet him. As I started doing some back channeling and getting to know him better, every single person I talked to is always asked, is he hiring? Is he hiring? And that for me was the biggest takeaway, that people want to work with this leader. People respect this leader. And he built a real estate software business from scratch and scaled it to probably even $150 million of recurring revenue by now, without $1 of institutional capital. So that told me a lot of things. And then he introduced me to his former co-founder and CTO, Mike Triunfo, and the three of us came together, right? So we have a technical person on the team who's a CTO. I don't have that skill set. Johnny doesn't have that skill set. Built the architecture and infrastructure for Homie. And then you have a leader who had built the business. He was a president and co-founder of Entrada from zero. So he had that pattern recognition. And you take my skill set, which is very little compared to them, but you match them all together. It makes a good recipe and increases the probability again of success. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Mike. It's really good feedback. I mean, ultimately, you want to find people that complement you and bring in that area of expertise on the other end. And I mean, that's great advice too, even just from a hiring standpoint. For those of you that are experiencing hiring, find somebody that challenges you a little bit. So with that, Jeff, I'll give you final say.
Thanks. And can I say, I love you, Mike.
I'm going to hang up now before I say anything else.
So, you know, Mike is like the perfect founder. He and his team are the perfect founders that we are on a search for at StartUpNV to help. Probably, you know, back when he was beginning, maybe he didn't quite have the two or the other partners that he had together there, trying to connect people to create those awesome teams where you do have the complementary sets of people that are investable from an angel or a venture perspective, that have a great idea and can execute. That's what we look for. So like I said, I love you, Mike. And in terms of, you know, my best advice out there is pursue your dreams. But do be ready to have some thick skin. I mean, our dream at StartUpNV is to create the kind of startup ecosystem that I grew up in my career in Silicon Valley, Seattle, and Austin. We've got some great partnerships over in Salt Lake with Boom Startup and some of the folks over there that are helping us out here in Nevada, because we're a lot more like them than we are like Silicon Valley or California. So executing on those strategies. But our idea is we want to grow this startup community throughout the state, but frankly, the biggest piece of that's here in Vegas. And if we can create this ecosystem that's producing, you know, an extra $500 million, $500 million a year in economic contribution to our statewide economy, then the next time one of these downturns comes around, we're a little more resilient, right? We're a little bit more diversified. That's not to take away from any of the awesome work that's being done in our traditional industries and gaming and hospitality and mining and some of the other things that we already do well. But having this other startup ecosystem alongside and all of the things that it requires and implies is going to make all of us more resilient, because there will be another time like this, and it's great that we reinvent ourselves, but I'm hoping that it doesn't have to come down to doing so much of that the next time one of these things happens to us. So, you know, if you're at all interested in doing a startup of your own, or if you are an accredited investor or an investor that's interested in learning about how to invest in these startups, please reach out to me. I'd love to chat.
Jeff, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your insight. Again, thank you to all the members who joined us today. This will be available on YouTube, on our Vegas Chamber YouTube channel. So please check us out there. Again, this wouldn't be possible without our generous sponsors to help us deliver this content, because Zoom is kind of expensive. But so thank you to SCE Federal Credit Union and UNLV Executive MBA program. Mike, Jeff, you guys are great. Thanks again for joining us. I'm sure this will be one of many calls. I think we probably will do one with our Vegas Young Professionals. And again, thank you to everyone that joined. Please reach out to us if you need anything. We'll see you at the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. This was fun. See ya.
Bye.